Do you want to hit the table again?
No, go ahead.
Hello and welcome back to IVF Daddies. I'm Richard and
I am Julio.
And welcome back. And today we have somebody who I've wanted to interview for quite a while for a variety of reasons. One of which is because I got divorced, as a lot of you know. And that's her shtick. And today we have the wonderful Miss Intelligator. Not interrogator, not intelligentsia, but interrogator. No.
I could be all of the above, you know?
All of the above.
Yes.
Sarah. Let's just go with Sarah. Hi and welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. And you are based in California?
Yes, Los Angeles.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I wanted to clarify specifically where you practice, because he got divorced in London. I grew up in Venezuela. Like I always say, you can decorate a Christmas tree with the lawyers in my family. And then there's American lawyers like my mother was a divorce attorney, a family lawyer. Yeah, so I grew up running house to house to like the business of divorce is almost like the business of a wedding. But then you have in Europe, you have like a bundle package, and then the lawyers have to like deal with that price. And in America, it's like 30 minutes, like it's $1,000 every phone call.
I wish. I mean, some lawyers, yes. And particularly in Los Angeles where I practice, there are some, just to elaborate a little bit, it's not just lawyers in America. Every state has its own separate rules to complicate things. And so to be clear, I'm only licensed to practice in California and Texas. I'm not an active member practicing in Texas, but I am licensed to practice there. But I practice in California, so I really can only speak to California law. It's not like there's this American divorce law or family law.
Which kind of feeds neatly into IVF Daddies, because a lot of what we've spoken about, right, is different states in the United States and doing bits here and bits there and bits there. And there's federal law, and then there's state law, and it just becomes super complicated. And I think one of the things that I really wanted to talk to you about was in California, obviously, because we've just ascertained that you can only practice there, is the process of divorce. Like I've been through it. I went through it here amicably, I think as amicable as one could be. I mean, you get divorced for a reason, right? But when you're going through IVF, you are in this bubble, you're making things, you're doing things. It's all about the embryos. It's all about life and creation and doing all those different things. When it gets to the stage where you are getting divorced, I had embryos still. My ex-husband and I had embryos each. How does that work in California when you are a couple getting divorced with embryos that you've made together?
Yeah, so my understanding is that most facilities have an agreement that they have parties sign when they come in and they start the IVF process. And so that agreement largely controls. So if, one party can't go and start using embryos without the other's consent, or they have some sort of mutual agreement as to what happens to the embryos if they end up divorced or separated or whatnot.
Yeah, because in our case, we owned the embryos jointly. And when we got divorced, those embryos that were made with my sperm came to me, and those that went with his sperm went to him. Mm-hmm. So that we each owned our own embryos, which it seems, it's almost like you're divorcing your properties, right? Like, this is mine, that is yours. I made this before the marriage.
Yeah. I think, it's kind of interesting, at least in California, pets are treated as property, not as like children, like human children, right? So obviously, I know everyone thinks that, okay, my pet, it's a person. And so I hear it come up a lot of times when people are like, well, we want to share custody of our pets. And I have to break it to them that unfortunately pets are property, quote unquote, property under the law. They don't like that response, but no one's cutting a pet in half. It's not like the story of King Solomon where we split the baby. Not usually. I mean, I've had people come up with custody agreements and things like that, but I have to just remind them that it's not a child, and so it's sort of not totally enforceable.
I will keep the guinea pig, because
you keep the dog
I'll keep the yacht. I wish we had a yacht. I mean, the closest we get to a yacht is watching the Titanic. So kind of on that whole thing, when I was talking to somebody in Sweden the other day, and they have, I don't know if it's court mandated or state mandated, but when they get to around the age, your child gets to the age of 2, they're recommended they go through couples therapy, and they go through a whole system whereby they are talking through the challenges that they're facing as a new couple with a child. Not as a new couple, but a new couple with a child. So the family unit has changed. Do you see a correlation in childhood adventures and divorce? Or do you see, I mean, what would you say is like a driver of that?
Yeah, I think that, okay, so in the United States, there's a statistic, and this is like, there are studies on this. This is out there. This information's out there. The average length of time before a couple has their first child in a marriage in the United States is 3 years. Most people, not all, but most people go on to then have a second child. And the average length of a marriage in the United States is 8 years. And in my opinion, I don't think that's a coincidence. I think people have their first child 3 years on average into the marriage, and 8 years into the marriage, they're getting a divorce. Whether they have another child in between or not, they're trying to probably work at things. The problems are starting to surface. I think there is nothing like having a child to shine an inescapable spotlight on the problems in a relationship. And it's not because children are the problem. It's because we are now being asked to work together to raise a child under extremely stressful circumstances, and all of the things that may not have been right about the relationship that didn't seem very problematic when we didn't have this huge gargantuan responsibility in our laps. We could get by not necessarily seeing eye to eye on really fundamental values and how we want to navigate life together and all that. We can do that. We're having a good time. Nothing is really, it's not that serious. But now we have a child, and we have to do things together, and we have to raise a child in a similar way. Right? We want to have similar ideals and instill and impart similar values in our child. And if our value systems are not aligned, or if we want to do things very differently, and it's a lot more complicated than that, obviously. But I do think that having children, if you are not in a really strong, correct relationship, that will definitely drive a huge wedge.
Well, if you're getting divorced, I don't think you're in a strong, correct relationship.
Well, not always, but probably.
Unless you're Gwyneth Paltrow and you're consciously uncoupling.
I bought that book. I bought 2 because I was like, one for me and one for my ex, and maybe we can read this, and maybe we could. She never read it.
That's passive aggressive. You never give a self-help book to a person that you're fighting with.
I know. Yeah, there's a different
story.
Well,
so the thing, for me is, why do, of course, we always try to do everything here as possible, as positive reinforcement as possible, and uplifting, but on divorce, there's the business of divorce. To me, it's almost like the business of getting married, right? Why does divorces in California last so long? You can see people being married for 3 years and getting divorced for 7.
Well, again, I don't have any sort of data to support this. This is really just my opinion, but I think that there are several reasons for that. One, if you live in California, California is not specifically California, but there are places in California that are among the most expensive in the world to live. You have San Francisco here, you have Los Angeles here, you have Orange County here. They're some of the most expensive places in the world. So people have more money, and that might translate to more assets. Those things need to be divided. I tend to see people fighting over children a lot more than assets. Typically, people do fight over assets. So, I think that a lot of times the litigation gets drawn out, not necessarily over child custody issues, even though that's maybe the reason people fight about the most, but because we have kind of sort of a complexity in the extent of the assets, right? Things need to be traced because people had so much money coming into the marriage, and it was commingled or whatever it might be. One partner might have been financially in charge during the marriage, and the other partner has no idea what's going on. financially. And so they have to get a forensic accountant involved and do a lot of digging, and they don't believe what the other person is saying. They think they're hiding it. So now we have these battles going on. I don't think, I mean, I know you're being hyperbolic, but I don't think divorces mostly take like 7 years. But yes, I have seen some really, really acrimonious divorces take 2 to 3 years. That's on the longer side because courts typically like to move things along. And so if parties are sort of stuck, the court will sort of step in, usually in California anyway, to try to move things forward.
Because the other thing is, for example, here in London, there's no prenup, and
Wow.
you can be legally separated, you can be divorced, and you can settle the finances later. Is that the case?
So there is something in California called a bifurcation of status, which is where you can terminate the marriage. You can say, okay, we're not married anymore, we're divorced. And then they can deal with all of the other issues later, or you can agree on some issues and have what's called a partial judgment, meaning you have an agreement on some issues, but then reserve jurisdiction, meaning you're going to have to deal with those other issues later on down the road. And you'll technically be divorced, but you'll just have to deal with the other issues down the road. So it does happen where we have sort of a two-parter.
I think kicking things down the line is a good thing. It's like there's too overwhelming to deal with everything at once. Let's figure this. That's good. Let's and typically it's always about money. That's one of the problems.
Yeah. And it is, or it's about something else, and people just hold things hostage.
Yeah. Well, it's resentment. There's anger. It's like going through anything, right? You have to understand why this happened, because it's like having a child. You have a dream, right? You had the dream of getting married and for it lasting forever, and then going from there. I think that at least that was for me. But dreams change, and that's okay. And I think, do you ever get to the point where, again, I don't know how this works in the United States, but there's mediators trying to solve and external parties involved?
Yeah, in California, we have something called mediation. It's voluntary. Sometimes the parties, when they set a matter for trial, are ordered to go to mandatory mediation, but typically it's something that is voluntary. I'm a huge advocate of mediation or any sort of informal settlement negotiations, whatever that might look like, wherever you happen to be, wherever in the world you are, where you have a neutral third party step in to try to help you reach a resolution. And they're totally neutral. They're just there to try to help negotiate and facilitate a resolution. That's way better than litigation, like 100% of the time.
And is that so? When you get into when you hire a lawyer to deal with something, it's not recommended to talk to the person. It's like now the lawyers have to handle it, or like.
Not necessarily. Go ahead.
How does it work?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, so in California, if you hire a lawyer, the only rule essentially is that if somebody is represented by a lawyer, I, as a lawyer, am not allowed to talk to that person unless their lawyer gives me permission to talk. So like, for example, if you, Richard, you hire a lawyer and, I'm representing your ex, and I want to talk to you directly, I wouldn't be allowed to do that unless your lawyer said it's okay. I now need to communicate exclusively with your lawyer. That doesn't stop you, Richard, from talking to your ex or communicating directly with your ex. Sometimes I recommend it because I think that, when people have lawyers, it just automatically starts escalating things. They're like, oh, you hired a lawyer? I need to lawyer up too. And it's like, now our lawyers are going to duke it out. And my lawyer's more aggressive than yours. And my lawyer's a shark. And they start like trying to one up each other with their lawyers. And, I say, sure, if there's something you can communicate directly to your ex about, then do it. My concern is if you start saying things and you start escalating because things are kind of acrimonious, then my suggestion is don't, because that could come with a corollary of other problems. Like somebody might say, you know what, you're harassing me and I'm going to get a restraining order against you. And we might start seeing some escalation on that front. And so I kind of take it on a case by case basis. Just the lawyers cannot talk to parties if the parties are represented, but otherwise parties can speak to each other if they have lawyers.
So most of my information is out of reality TV, pop culture, or
perfect.
Very California, very LA, very Hollywood. And one of the things that, let's presume, is California, right? So you said it is the most expensive places in the world. One of the things that a lot of people, do you throw a conspiracy theory and you're going to debunk it?
Okay.
So in my head, people are trying to get divorced, but they don't really get divorced, because if one person gets divorced, then the marriage doesn't pay the lawyers. You have to pay the lawyers out of your own pocket. So the divorce is dragged along. And then sometimes the lawyers can get into like a conflict of interest. Like, let's just get this going so we can both get paid. And how does that affect if you have like traditional marriages, nuclear families versus people that have, if you have encountered IVF and surrogacy, or different, as Richard, different sperm, different egg donors? It's like, one kid is mine, one kid is yours. I'm going to try to take it apart. Like, where is the law there?
So first of all, let me start off by saying reality TV is totally real. So everything you see in reality TV, 100% real. So I hope you believe everything you see, right? I'm kidding. I'm obviously kidding.
This is
I'm just.
I thought you were being honest.
No, I'm very sarcastic here. I'm being very deadpan. I'm razzing you a little bit. I'm making fun of you a little bit here.
Richard, I'm literally like, I laugh all the time. I'm like, no, babe, that's
we're like
totally
that. We're talking on top of each other, like the reunion. I was about to bring Erica Jane's book, to Reed's marriage, Carl and Mauricio, every housewife. Look,
let me tell you. Okay, I'm not going to name the show because I don't want to out anybody, but I was on an episode of a reality TV show, and I will tell you, and you can probably Google it and find it, but in any event, it wasn't one of those like housewife or any like sexy ones. It wasn't a raunchy one. It was like a very like, G-rated one. Anyway, there is nothing real about reality TV. Okay, so we'll just leave it there. But
you were on Octomum when she was getting divorced. Oh my gosh.
No, I wish. I mean, that would have been like relevant to my profession. This was like totally irrelevant to my profession.
I think it's your only Octomum.
You guys can just Google and go on a deep dive. I'll let you go down the rabbit hole if you're interested.
Career. Everything else is inside household. I'm a detective.
So okay, there you go.
Real Housewives isn't real.
Yeah.
Tell us about your book.
My book is real. I have to answer. I have this question first.
Otherwise, it's going to be a conspiracy theory.
No, there's no conspiracy theory. So I think, and let me just make sure that I'm understanding the question correctly. You're saying that attorneys, and correct me if I'm wrong, that attorneys have an incentive to drag out divorce cases because if people are divorced, then they are no longer getting paid through the marital assets, right?
And someone has FU money and someone scrambles for money.
Right. Yeah. So in California, that is not the case. There are attorneys who do churn fees. There are attorneys who drive up the cost because they just want to make money and they're just, jerks. But, so in California, everybody has to pay for their own attorneys. That's not like, it comes out of the community pot. Like, it's not like there's a chunk of money that is used for that. Everyone comes up with the money. They have to sometimes borrow. They come up with the money to pay their attorney. Then in California, if there's a disparity in the party's access to funds, meaning one party has greater access to funds than the other, that party can and usually will be ordered to contribute to the other party's attorney's fees or to pay some portion of the other party's attorney's fees. Sometimes there are no assets to draw from, and so a court will order an asset sold to pay for the attorney's fees of both parties. But typically it comes out of, money wherever that money may exist. And if one party either earns a lot more or has like access to an asset that is significantly more than what the other person has, then they can be ordered and usually are ordered to contribute to the other's fees. So at least in California, that conspiracy theory, unfortunately, I'm sorry to debunk, is not true. Sorry.
I mean, no, it's true. I don't want it to be true. Because sometimes I want people to trust their lawyer, not to think that they are in cahoots with the other lawyer. Oh, because this is a marriage and you're rich and the other person is not rich and you're going to pay for both of us. Let's just drag this out.
Yeah, I mean, at least in California, no. And then there are obviously ethical rules around that. So if some attorneys have some sort of like side deal going on to try to drain the parties of their resources, then they could get disbarred. That's like an ethical violation. We have all sorts of rules around that. So,
and when it comes to embryos and kids through different genetics, because there's a famous case in Spain where like both took their own kids.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think people can agree to anything they want to do. In California, if the child is born of the marriage, so it doesn't really matter to whom the child is born. If it's like on the birth certificate, you're both the dads, then that child is presumed to be a child of the marriage. And now that child or both children or however many children they are, they're under the jurisdiction of the court, and the court can make orders for custody and visitation. It's not like, oh, because you're genetically that person's or that person's, then no, that person has a right to you and that person does not.
So I'm going to need you to make that sound that you said for
Yeah.
my ringtone, because I loved
Okay.
it. That was great.
You know what? And every time you hear about a conspiracy theory or how reality TV shows are real, you'll just play that wah, wah,
But anyway, but you did like, you wrote a book.
I did write a book. Yes.
Tell us about that.
Okay. It's called Live, Laugh, Find True Love. It's a little bit of a sarcastic title. Some people, I go on a lot of podcasts, they're like, I love that. It's about living and laughing and finding true love. And I'm like, not really.
Somebody dies.
If you can't tell, well, yeah, I'm a little bit sarcastic if you haven't gotten that already. I'm a little, I like to kind of like razz people a little bit. And part of the, one of the things in the book that I talk about is how people have this really fantasy fairy tale notion of relationships and marriage in particular, and they sort of glorify it and idealize it. And then they're really grossly disappointed when life sets in and it's real and it's not this idealized version of what they thought it would be, which obviously if you think it's a fairy tale, you're going to be disappointed no matter what, no matter if you have the most idyllic relationship in the world. And so, there's this whole culture of like, yeah, eat, pray, love, live, laugh, love, all that kind of stuff. And so I'm kind of poking fun at that a little bit in the title. Not many people get it. I get it. That's all that matters. Yes, the book is essentially, it is a relationship guide, but it's written from a very unique perspective in that it's written from the perspective of a divorce attorney. I see where things go wrong and I sort of reverse engineer relationships to try to explain to people who are either trying to get into a relationship, they've just come out of a divorce, they want to reflect upon what went wrong and find a new relationship that is more meaningful, or, anyone who's even in a relationship and sort of reflecting on their own relationships. But I'm showing where things went wrong, these patterns that I see over and over and over again in my close to 2 decades of practicing as a family law attorney. And then I'm saying, okay, don't do what those people did. Take their mistakes and let's not do that. And instead, let's do this. And here's your step-by-step guide to finding a meaningful relationship based on not doing what those people did.
Which is amazing. You're obviously, so if anybody's looking for a divorce lawyer who's a bit sarcastic, has written a book, can reverse engineer your divorce, but also lives and breathes yoga, you've got one right here, right?
Here I am in the flesh.
And also you're married, right? And
I've been divorced and I am also remarried. I was very young when I got married the first time. We were together for 10 years, but only married for 1 year and 5 months. And so really, really successful marriage there.
And how long did the divorce last?
It lasted 1 year and 5 months, but we were together for 10 years. But I met him when I was 17. We got married when I was 26. We separated when I was 27. I've now been with my current husband. We've been married for 10 and a half years. We've been together for, close to 13. Little more success there. And I think I've taken my own advice.
You're literally living proof of reverse engineering the relationship and do what you shouldn't be doing.
Yes.
Like learning from the mistakes and not marry the same person with different names.
Exactly. Don't let divorce be a revolving door. Don't keep repeating the mistakes. Like, here's the thing about divorce. Divorce sucks. Like, let's just put it plainly. Like, it's painful. It's financially draining. It's emotionally probably one of the most excruciating things you can go through. But I also think the flip side of that is it can be one of the greatest growing and learning experiences for us as human beings. I don't want anyone to have to go through it if they don't have to.
Did you hear that?
But I think that if we can reflect on where we went wrong or why we made certain decisions, it might even give us insight into some like childhood stuff that we didn't even know about. Like our childhood stuff was sort of part of the reason we selected our partner. And that then forces us to face that and resolve it, hopefully. And then we now enter a new relationship or even dating, or even our choices in who we're dating. We approach them very differently because we recognize the reasons we approached that relationship a certain way. And I think that, you know, taking a step back as a divorce attorney and kind of stepping into my role as a yoga teacher, I think that we have these really meaningful experiences in life that force us to grow, and they teach us. And so we have to actually have gratitude for those experiences, no matter, and the more difficult and the more hurtful and the more horrible those experiences, the more we can grow and learn, and then ultimately hopefully be happy because we had those experiences in our lives, and we have to view them with gratitude.
100%. And it's very interesting because we do couples therapy once a week, every week, religiously. And in our first session,
sometimes twice a week,
sometimes twice a week if he's being really annoying.
Boy, after this episode, you know, it's reality TV is going to be the subject of the next session. I'm sorry, guys.
You have no idea. But in one of the first sessions, it was like, I don't want to build a new house with old bricks. And the only way to build a new house is by either understanding what the trauma was, why I did the decisions I made, all those different things that created the old me, and take the good of that and bring that to the new relationship and understand what went wrong in the old relationship. And I think it's really valuable. To your point, I do have gratitude for my ex and the times we had together and the learnings that I've had since we've broken up. It doesn't make it any easier. It's really hard. It's really challenging. And there are days when you feel like a failure because you had this dream and you know, but actually you have to take away from that life changes and I change. We change as individuals. Every day we're changing. And if you can't embrace that and love that, then that becomes a problem.
And also, nobody likes to lose an investment, right? It doesn't matter what it is. It's just like losing like if you invest a lot of your time, energy in it, it will be like,
right.
It's challenging.
Well, and you can view it that way, or you can view it as it was an investment into your personal growth. And I think that when you have children together, it's more difficult to view it that way because they're kind of, I mean, in horrible cases, they're in the middle of it. Even in the most amicable cases, you know, even if they're okay, you're kind of concerned that you put them through it or you have feelings of guilt or whatnot. But, you know, putting that aside for a moment, you wouldn't even have your children if it wasn't for the other person. And so that is something that I try to remind clients to focus on, is that no matter how much you hate the other person, your children exist because of that other person. And again, just shifting your perception and focusing on that gratitude to the other person for the lessons he or she taught you, for the children he or she gave you or allowed you to have. And I think that's, you know, that's the best way to overcome whatever feelings you're grappling with. And it doesn't mean you shouldn't feel what you're feeling. I mean, you're human. Feel it, experience it, don't suppress it. But we have the power to choose how we view things, and we can choose to look at things as, ugh, that's horrible. I hate that person. And they might be worthy of your hate. Or you can say, you know what? I don't care for that person, but I'm still grateful to him or her for teaching me lessons, for giving me my children, you know, things like that.
Well, in my case, my dad is on his third wife, and it's funny because all of us went to the third wedding.
Great.
And I've always said, like, I'm pro-divorce because the best thing my family could ever given me is my dad's daughter from the second marriage, which we consider sisters. If you say the word half sisters, it's like you're completely a nice. So it's just like I cannot if this is what divorce brings, everybody should get divorced like at least once. And but then you touch something that it has a lot of kind of confusion. You said something in California, when you hit the year 10, something happened when you get divorced, right?
No, I didn't say that, but you said that. No. But I will address it.
No.
You were reality TV.
Stop yapping in my ear. You were married for 10 years, or you were married for 10 years and got divorced. Like, is it a difference?
No. So I was married for a year and 5 months. We were together for 10 years. There's no common law marriage in California. Some states in the United States have something called common law marriage, where when you have been together for a certain amount of time, you're technically considered marriage. California does not have that. So you get married, you're married. You're not married, you're not married. So we were only married for a year and 5 months. I've been married to my current husband for 10 years. I think it's a good thing that you brought up the 10 years, because a lot of people who call me for their initial consultation, that's kind of the number that they bring up, because it actually is significant in California. A marriage is considered of quote unquote long duration when you've been married for 10 years or more in California. And in those cases, so the distinction here is, if spousal support, which is sometimes called alimony, if spousal support is an issue and a couple has been married for fewer than 10 years, the court can only hold on to the power. We call it jurisdiction. I'm not going to use the fancy terminology, but the court can only hold on to the power to award spousal support for up to half the duration of the marriage. So under 10 years. Now, that doesn't mean the court is gonna award spousal support for half the duration of marriage, but it means it can, and that's the maximum. Over 10 years, the court can hold on to the power, the jurisdiction, to award spousal support until the death of either party or the remarriage of the supported spouse. Again, it doesn't mean that person is going to get support for life. It means the court has the power to order it until the death of either party or the remarriage of the supported spouse. So I get asked, I heard 10 years. I heard 10 years, right? People are always asking me about 10 years, and you may have heard that on some reality TV show. It might be something that is significant. So that's the reason the 10-year is significant. That might be what you're referring to.
I heard it from Erica Jane, which was married to Tom Girardi, which might have a little bit of knowledge on divorce, but on lawyers, but I don't really know because he's in jail now.
He's in jail. But yeah, no, this has been really, really fascinating. And I think, again, we always try to do positive topics, but we also have to touch on the reality of life, which can be divorce. And I think, as you've pointed out, the gratitude for what you had, assuming obviously that you can get to that point, I think is really, really valuable. Gratitude for the children that you've brought into this world together. And gratitude for the learning is very, very key. So I'm going to gratitude to you. Thank you very much for coming on today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Anybody who wants her book, please, we'll put a link into the blurb. But thank you so much for coming and listening and talking.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I would like to leave for you, if you can say an advice or one thing that you can always get, like a question that you can say that like come a lot in your cases, what would it be?
To my clients or to people who are looking for a relationship?
As an attorney.
An
obstacle that you can predict easily.
I'm sorry, I want to make sure I understand the question. Something I can predict.
Give us an example of something you say in pretty much every consult to those people that you're talking to.
That's what I thought. I just want to make sure I was answering the question. Okay. So I always tell people when they come into my office that you're standing at the bottom of a really gargantuan mountain looking up. Maybe the peak is enshrouded in clouds. You can't even see the top. And it seems so daunting that you're going to have to climb this mountain. But ultimately, I'm there. I'm going to guide you. Whether I'm there or not, you're gonna go up the hill and you're going to come down the other side and you're going to look back and you're going to say, oh man, I did that. I nailed it, right? And it always seems so daunting when you're standing at the bottom, but every single person I've ever represented has gotten to the other side. They've typically been really grateful and they're at a much better place when they're on the other side and when they're leaving my office than when they first walk in. And most people are really, as much as they don't want to go through a divorce, or they do, but they don't want to deal with the horrible day-to-day stuff that a divorce entails, they're ultimately happy when it's over and it's done, and they're now starting a new chapter in their lives. And so I always remind people that, like, no matter how daunting and difficult it seems, standing at the bottom looking up, you will get to the other side and you will be far better off for having gone through this challenge.
And if you go through it with Sherpa Sarah, then you're great.
Oh yeah, I'll play a little wind flute and everything.
Sound bad.
I'll bring an alpaca, you know,
And you get to the top and you can do downward dog and then go down the other side. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
So everybody get divorced now.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you
You're
so
the best.
Thank you guys.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.